I'm here with Mitya from Drop Protocol. Welcome to Sovereign Radio.
Hi, and thanks for having me.
So I want to jump in. I want to understand Drop Protocol. I think let's start. What is the problem that you're actually trying to solve?
Yeah, we're solving a problem of unlocking liquidity for the ecosystem and for the interchain ecosystem in general and for the modular ecosystem as well. And the way we think about this problem is native staking, the way it was implemented in in Cosmos SDK and the way it is used in most of the Cosmos SDK based chains is kind of blessing and a curse. Because it is very easy to use, because of typically high inflation and high staking APRs. It's kind of very appealing to the users, but it also means that it became almost like a default strategy for everyone holding TIA, for instance, now.
Yeah.
And most of these assets are kind of locked and frozen in native staking, which means that it's difficult to use them elsewhere because they're bonded, and it takes 21 days to unbond your tokens. And it means that there is little liquidity for applications or DeFi applications, any sort of applications to use. And it becomes a bit of a chicken and egg problem because you have lack of liquidity, therefore the applications are not growing as much as they could. Therefore, it's less appealing to use your liquidity in the applications, and therefore it's kind of more appealing to just stake and hold and relax.
Yeah, and these networks, when released, like they always kind of encouraged like any token holders to stake because it added to the security of the system.
Right.
So those like high staking percentages were kind of seen as a positive.
Right.
But you're saying that like the flip side is you can't get as much usage out of the chain.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think staking percentages per se are not bad. They're great because that's a way to provide security to the chain. The question is basically how do you solve this conundrum and keep high staking ratio, have great liquidity in the network, but also at the same time have a lot of liquidity for the builders that are building their rollups, applications, and whatnot, and basically make it a blossoming ecosystem with lots of liquidity, flowers blooming, and such.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's the idea.
Cool. What about you? What's your role there?
I'm a co-founder on the business and product side for the protocol. I've been kind of in the staking space before, and also in the kind of Cosmos and smart contract space before. So This is a nice intersection for me.
What about the project Drop Protocol? Like, is that a newer company? Is there a history to like this project and the other co-founders?
Yeah, it's both. It's a new company that has a lot of history.
Okay.
Yeah, the team has a lot of history because the idea of Drop and some people in the team, they go back into Lido on Terra days.
So, Lido on Terra days. Yeah. Wow. You guys have seen some things, I'm sure.
Yeah, we've maybe too much.
Yeah.
So Lido on Terra was a super interesting period. Because Terra, from the perspective of like DeFi ecosystem, Terra was obviously great. There were lots of very interesting teams that were attracted to this ecosystem, and they were building interesting applications on it. And Lido on Terra as a liquid staking protocol was super successful.
Wow.
Not very well known fact, but it was bigger than Lido on Ethereum
at
some point in 2022. Maybe not for a long time, but it was the case.
Wow.
And and then obviously it wasn't anymore.
It wasn't. Big crash.
Yeah, there was a big crash, but it also created a bit of an urgency for an idea that existed even before. Is okay, like liquid staking for Terra is super successful, but how do we enable it for multiple Cosmos SDK based chains?
Yeah.
And then when Terra crashed, it was more of an urgent thing to do. And so the idea was, okay, like let's create some interchain infrastructure around the protocol so that you can still basically deploy one set of smart contracts on one chain and deal with multiple interchain assets across multiple chains so that you create this kind of network effects around the protocol.
Do you ever consider yourself sort of like a bridge at any point? Because it's almost like you're talking about, like as it stands right now, you have each one of these chains, they each have stake. They could each have potentially like a liquid staking element in them, but you're kind of now trying to bring them together. Like, do you see it sort of as like, and maybe bridge is such like the wrong word, but
bridge is,
I know it's
actually,
loaded.
I think that's a great question about the bridge because First of all, I think there is a component to the protocol that allows a smart contract on one chain, and we're launching on Neutron to work with all these different assets. So we're not using, we're using IBC for it, obviously, IBC as well as interchain accounts, interchain queries, interchain transactions. So yeah, there is that part to it. But then there is also a part like how do you enable all these assets for the rollups? And also an interesting thing, because we have a LIDO partnership, how do we bridge STETH to the interchain to bring this liquidity to all these applications that are building in the interchain. So that's a different type of a bridge, and it's not something that Drop builds directly, but we're kind of partnering with a project that has been existing in the Neutron chain for a while, and it's called the Bridge Aggregator. So it works like with 3 different bridges between Ethereum and Neutron and the broader interchain to kind of increase the security of this bridging process.
Wow.
Which is a nice way to basically reduce all these barriers of creating kind of interchain liquidity and bring liquidity from Ethereum to the interchain and making everyone comfortable using this.
Which bridges are they? You sort of said 3 bridges.
Yeah, so these are XLR, Wormhole, and Hyperlane bridges.
Okay.
And there is some infrastructure on top of this that makes it almost like a consensus across the bridges, so that first you bridge like a signal token that says, okay, like we all agree that the bridging actually happens, and then you do the actual transfer.
But this is not you. This is like a different project.
That's adjacent to us, but I think it's like part of the thing that we're building is like we think that LSTs, especially in the modular ecosystem, are basically they can be as successful as well as good are the integrations between LSTs and all the use cases that they support. Like to my previous point, there are lots of reasons to just stake natively, and therefore you have to create very, very appealing, well-integrated, well-executed use cases around this kind of liquid tokens to make them like a preferable option, basically for the token holder. So yeah, this is one of the components of this ecosystem.
Where does Drop Protocol live today? Like, where is it? So, because you're talking about linking together all of these different networks.
Right.
Yeah, where does it live?
So the smart contracts of Drop Protocol are now in a testnet on the Neutron network. So Neutron, it's a separate blockchain that uses interchain security from Cosmos Hub.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the assets minted by Drop Protocol, they can exist anywhere, essentially. And even like from the user experience perspective, you could be holding these assets, for instance, like on TIA. You can initiate this transaction on TIA and then have your liquid token minted and brought to TIA within kind of one transaction, essentially. So yeah, we try to make it as, let's say, as easy to use, and we try to abstract away from where exactly the smart contract is hosted by itself.
Okay.
But there are some very interesting architectural kind of solutions that we're using from Neutron, so this is why it's a good place for us to host it.
For a user to engage with you, though, are they using sort of the traditional Cosmos wallets, or are they using something else? And like, which chain are they using?
That's a very good question as well. So they can, as I said, they can initiate this transaction from basically any chain where they have these assets right now.
Yeah.
For the starters, it's mostly kind of normal, quote unquote, Cosmos wallets. But I think this is also a very interesting question, because like wallets and or like custodies and custody providers is one more way how you can, like, working really well with them, you can reduce these like barriers to using these assets. And this is one of the things that we're kind of investing heavily into as well. So yeah, the goal is to basically be really present anywhere where the token holder kind of has this idea of, I want to get more yield on my assets.
Okay.
So the goal is to be basically present in any of the like channels that they prefer to use. Maybe not even wallets or like any staking websites and such.
But do they have to select a particular chain? Like, would it be using Cosmos, Atom, or can it be like anywhere? Could it be like living in osmosis or something?
Yeah, they can be anywhere, really. And shout out to Skip Protocol, by the way, building great infrastructure that enables that. They can be anywhere. They have to know what assets that they want to work with. But yeah, otherwise the assets do not have to be on a particular chain, really.
So I think the next question then is, in the ecosystem, where do you position yourself? Because so you're built on Neutron, which is connected to the hub.
Yeah.
Like, are you a Cosmos hub-centric project? This is sort of like where we're coming from, so that's what it sounds like. But yeah, how do you see yourself in the larger ecosystem?
Yeah, the biggest ecosystems for us, or like the biggest assets for us, are TIA and Atom.
Yeah.
We're liquidity centric rather than ecosystem centric, really. I think these two ecosystems are kind of unique, and they have like probably different approaches to how exactly you unlock liquidity. But what we're building essentially is this infrastructure that allows the liquidity to be unlocked and creates like flywheel effects around these liquid assets, and ways to integrate into these ecosystems so that it becomes basically as native as possible for the ecosystems. So from that perspective, we belong to the interchain ecosystem first, and then we build kind of presence in different parts of this broad ecosystem, if it makes sense. Now, these terms are getting very confusing, but I hope it helps them. Yeah.
Well, and so you sort of talk about TIA and Atom as your like base tokens.
Right.
And it's interesting to me because I feel like over the last few years, you'd often more see like Atom and Osmosis.
Yeah.
Now you're really seeing TIA as like the second or like the equal to Atom. Are you seeing other teams doing that? Is that a trend? Do you think in the larger interchain ecosystem to use those two pairs?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a trend. I think there are lots of teams that kind of belong more to, let's say, to the modular. So, for instance, teams that are building rollups, I think they kind of maybe belong more to the modular. But there are definitely a few very interesting projects that exist kind of in the intersection. So, for instance, like one of the recent transitions that happened is like Stargaze, that used to be like a Cosmos SDK based L1, and I guess you could argue that it belonged more to the kind of Cosmos Hub ecosystem.
Yeah.
It's now also launching a rollup, but they keep in their L1 chain, so they stay interconnected in a sense.
With
so
Celestia.
Yep.
Oh, cool! I didn't know that.
It's kind of recent development, but yeah, I think we're not alone. And so our thinking is that there are kind of huge network effects to explore on the intersection of these, because like on the level of the technical stack, they're using many of the same components. And then once you have this kind of network effects around this infrastructure, it's probably helpful for both ecosystems actually to benefit from.
So you're saying you're supporting TIA, but what is your relationship to the Celestia like ecosystem? Are you also using Celestia for DA? Are you going to be a rollup of some kind?
So we are supporting TIA, meaning that any TIA holder could mint or TIA staker could mint a liquid token or liquid token derivative based on TIA, and then use it in like whatever applications, not necessarily in modular ecosystem, but presumably primarily in the modular ecosystem. And our relationship with the ecosystem, I guess, largely in how we work with the TIA holders and TIA rollups to enable this liquidity for the ecosystem. So like for the rollups and generally speaking for apps in the Celestia ecosystem, this liquidity is required to grow, and therefore our role is to make it very easy for them to get access to this liquidity, very easy for them to kind of keep the rollups sovereign and get benefits from like enabling this liquidity on the rollups. Essentially like creating the incentives in the ecosystem so that different actors in the ecosystem, like users, validators, builders, all have joint incentive for growing the liquidity, unlocking liquidity from native staking, and using it to grow the ecosystem at the end of the day. So from that perspective, we actually think that LSTs have pretty important role in any ecosystem, because I told about this kind of very, let's say, very deep imbalances that the native staking kind of creates. And LST as a layer on top of native staking can, to a large extent, kind of fix these imbalances and create different set of incentives for everyone involved. And I think this is the key role that we can play in the modular ecosystem. So it largely is an incentives alignment role from our perspective, and that's kind of the fundamental problem that we need to solve to unlock the power of these frozen assets. Yeah.
I think, yeah, and I think I just asked like if you're using their DA, but I guess you wouldn't, right? Because you're on neutron. So
Yeah.
or do you? Does your system actually have to use that in any way?
Yeah. Let's say so. The current implementation of Drop protocol relies on neutron, which uses Cosmos Hub's security, and there are very good reasons for us to use this particular setup. And also because of the some of the DeFi primitives that exist in the Neutron ecosystem that allow us to essentially create like very little friction to use the assets. Having said that, I think there are lots of exciting developments in the modular ecosystem in general, and never say never. So we'll see about that. But yeah, for now, let's say from the architectural perspective, we belong to the Neutron ecosystem. That's where the smart contracts are hosted and work with assets everywhere.
So I have a last question, and maybe Drop protocol kind of solves this, but are you at all worried about like the liquidity problem on in the interchain ecosystem generally? Like even like what you've said is like you actually enable more liquidity, but generally there's not a lot of liquidity. There's not even that much action. Like, are you worried a little bit that there's just not enough happening there?
This is, I think, exactly this chicken and egg problem that I was describing. So like action has to be enabled by something, right? And back to the Terra example, like Terra was the place where action happened because of these kind of mechanisms that created on the network level that every DeFi builder benefited from. So our theory is that the action starts to happen more once you have liquidity which is more readily available for the builders, and that every builder that comes has an opportunity to get way more liquidity to their protocol. And this is what we're trying to solve. So yes, it is a concern, but this is exactly the problem that we're addressing.
Perfect. Cool. Well, thanks so much for this interview.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. Great questions. And I enjoyed the discussion a lot.
Cool. And thank you for watching this episode of Sovereign Radio. See you on the next one.